Good morning, Kris.
Good morning.
Many thanks for taking up time today to come to see us and to talk to our listeners about what it is that you do and the business that you're involved in and how you've been on the journey over the last few months and certainly what's going to happen in the future. So if you wouldn't mind, could you give us a bit of background about you and your journey?
Certainly. And first and foremost, thank you for having me here, and good morning to all of your listeners. I hope that my contribution will matter in the end of it. So my name is Kris Leszczynski, and I head service operations at Edwardian Hotels London. Edwardian Hotels London is a privately owned company established and founded over 40 years ago by Jasminder Singh, who is our chairman and CEO. And we own and operate 13 hotels in the United Kingdom, including of Radisson Blu, Edwardian Properties, Radisson Collection Hotels, and now the latest addition to our portfolio, the Londoner, right in the heart of Leicester Square, the first super boutique hotel.
Wow, amazing. And you and your background, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of background as to how you got there. So a little bit of background, but then how you got to where you are today.
Certainly. Well, so I've been with Edwardian for 16 years, and I'm a prime example of a product of our Edwardian Academy. I started, as I said, 16, 17 years ago as a luggage porter at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Vanderbilt. In fact, I walked in with my CV through the main door looking for a seasonal job. I had studied hospitality back in Poland, and coming here did not really carry many expectations. I actually said to myself that if I was to get a pub job, I would have come back home probably after a few months. But if I got the job in the hotel, it could have created an opportunity for me to create a career. And hey, here I am. It's been one heck of a journey with Edwardian. And I'm not a unique example, by the way. There are many others like me who started from scratch and made their way up. And probably Edwardian is one of these companies that truly enables talent and fosters that ability to grow your own talent within the organization.
That's an amazing introduction to your world. So in terms of what you do at the organization, what is your role?
Certainly. So I had service operations in Edwardian. The idea of the role is to align tools, processes, people, more importantly, together to create an underpinning structure for commercial divisions. Hotel operations, in essence, are there to retain and repeat the business. And we do so by standard compliance, by being quite relentless about service delivery, about our people. We do it through their people and by the people that we work with. And as I said, effectively, in order to provide financial and commercial fluency and success, operations are the ones who get it done. And that's when I come into the picture. So we work with structures, with local structures. We consider and research into new service concepts. We help organizations to align in terms of our tech and infrastructures. And me and my team effectively have a group-wide reach where we bring that element of unification. I think it's important in any organization that has got multi-sites, that you have that overarching element that allows you to bring that element of unity, that element of identity, culture. And that's what my role is about, yes.
You mentioned when we were talking earlier that the number of touch points that you have in a business, all those different areas. Could you expand on that a little bit? Because I was very impressed and amazed by that.
Certainly. So, as I said, the kind of day-to-day job is all about, as I said, working with operations, working with the people. So we help front of house teams. We help our contact centers, which obviously are responsible in a way to deliver commercial goals. So our reservations department, our guest services are quite important to us, and the entire infrastructure that goes behind. Press 1 for reservations and press 2 or hold for all the inquiries. It's actually quite a complicated thing to achieve altogether, and there is a lot going on behind it. Through the last 2 years, I have been also heavily involved in structural fluency. I think it's fair to say that we all had to assume a bit leaner, smarter way of working. and my role came together with trying to align on all of these novelties. We've been on a very steep learning curve organizationally, operationally, in terms of our operating model, and I think that no day is the same really in what I do.
Wow.
One could say that.
Never know what you're going to get.
Just to give an example, currently we're working on a project that will help us to quantify your emotional connector with the business. So it is important for us to try to understand what really creates a bond between an end client and the organization. And that very much goes back into your emotional sphere, which is quite difficult to capture, yet not impossible.
Wow. That must be cutting edge.
It's not that cutting edge. The academic concept has been there for a while. There is a great paper released by Harvard University about emotional connectors, where the author proves that by creating what makes you identify with a brand, is it a sense of self? Is it a sense of value? Sense of being recognized? Sense of safety? Why do you always pick that brand of shoes? What is it that makes you feel that this is the one? Often evaluation of satisfaction revolves around 1 to 10 satisfaction. How satisfied are you? How satisfied were you from your check-in? Score 2 for poor, 10 for great. But the question we should be asking is, how did that make you feel? I felt empowered, I felt energized, I felt welcomed, neglected, ignored. And I think that gives you so much more to think about. As a result of that analysis, you can then create much more meaningful action plans and follow-up. You can identify different things. So that's just one little project. I can go on forever about it because that's my little thing. I've been thinking about it for quite some time, and it is a fascinating element. How to bring it to the customer, how to understand the changes in buying habits, even by generations. Can we have the same offering for a person in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s? And probably the answer is no. Probably each of us feels a bit different. How we express ourselves, how we feel, and how we operate as a result as a human being.
Nice. Wow. I'd love to have 3-4 hours on this podcast, but unfortunately we've not got that sort of time to explore that and deep dive. Can I ask you and move on to the pandemic? Yes. That horrible P word that unfortunately has impacted all our lives, none more so than the hotel industry. And could you give us a little bit of for the listeners to understand what kind of impact it really had on you?
Well, it's rhetorical to say, but it's had a profound impact on hospitality. London is a brand. London is a destination. London is a transient city. London gathers industries of different sorts: tech, financial, service, retail, and all of a sudden, in times of plenty, it stops, and you don't know what is going to happen. Your revenues stop, your cash flow stops, you are forced to close every single establishment that guarantees a lifeline to 2,500 plus employees. So when the first lockdown was announced, we had about a week to think, how are we going to shut a hotel? I mean, hotels are not meant to be shut. They're not designed to be shut. There are no protocols of how to shut a hotel. So within that 1 week, we as an organization came together. It really brought us all together. The power of privately owned company came to its full fruition as we were able to make fast decisions, very nimble decisions, and design how to operate under lockdown. Mind that you cannot just shut down a hotel. Your key security systems need to operate. Your key utility systems need to operate. You cannot just stop running water through the taps because you're running a risk of bacteria building up. So you have to flush those toilets every second day. You have to have staff on premises. So it's been an incredibly steep learning curve from the operational perspective, but obviously then that came together with our financial fluency, where on a corporate level, the decisions had to be made in order how to secure additional grants and funds for the business to function. And I think that the strength of Edwardian came with the fact that 2 years down the line, we're still here, we're still standing. We are just about to open our 2 remaining properties, and
have they been closed throughout?
Yes, one of our properties has not opened for more than 2 years. So we have an opening tomorrow at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Sussex, just off Oxford Street, and the team are so incredibly excited and anticipating that the fact that finally we are going to have our guests back, our lives are coming back to norm, and it's been one heck of an experience. Edwardian did not stay dormant. I think it's fair to say that we took this opportunity, especially during the first lockdown where everything was shut. But in the background, we did a lot of work. We focused a lot on digital transformation. We knew that when we restart the business, it won't be as it had been before. We knew that we need to streamline our operating models. We knew that we had to rethink our operating structures. We had to rethink our service models. We had to rethink our approach towards hygiene. I mean, Edwardian has always been very focused on hygiene, but with the added expectation of customers, we actually embraced additional methodology, including of independent certification for cleanliness, for hygiene. And going back to the digital transformation, we really focused on investing in cutting-edge tech. Salesforce was one of the biggest additions to our portfolio. We also embraced Microsoft 360 suite for internal collaboration. We have added to our portfolio in terms of distribution. We have upgraded our distribution channels. We have worked closely with our partners like TravelClick, like Radisson, like Preferred Group, to try to understand what we actually could do better. It's fascinating when you are operating on day-to-day basis how much you overlook, how much do we agree with. It has always been like that.
Okay.
Pandemic gave you the opportunity to actually step away for a second. These processes are currently not being used. And all of a sudden you start asking questions. Why do we really do that? And it was fascinating that journey from the end of March 2020 all the way to September, when we were then allowed to open for a short period of time, how much we were able to change and reflect on because it was not in use.
Wow.
So that was quite an interesting journey altogether. And of course, I'm keeping our teams motivated. We started organizing daily call that everyone could access. Thanks to Microsoft Teams, we now have the potential for video conferencing, so we open it to our teams. We were doing bi-weekly updates provided by our managing director to the business with full transparency, with full clarity where we are. So we tried to keep our teams informed as much as we could throughout this period. Then of course furlough came with specific terms and conditions. You couldn't contact or speak to an employee who was on furlough. So we obviously had to fully align our operating model with the governance as well. That came as the situation developed, and we all remember that it was so incredibly uncertain. When is lockdown going to finish? How are we going to open? Additional grants came. The summer came, I remember very well, where we were all encouraged to go out and eat. Hospitality came back at 5-10%. Our occupancies before pandemic reached 87-90% on annual scale, and some hotels really hitting 95-97% in 2019. When you move back and reopen and your occupancy at 5-10%, you actually start wondering, is it even worth opening? In some cases, you actually ended up burning more monies than as if you had remained closed, because obviously you can't just open some part of the hotel. You need to reactivate the whole infrastructure, food and beverage, safety and security of guests, 24-hour staffing and so on and so forth. So that was quite a journey.
Wow, amazing. And again, fascinating information, and I know that our listeners will be hanging on every word. I'm hanging on every word you're saying. Moving on to the next part, which is sort of talking about a business within a business, because you also have fine dining within your operation.
Yes.
Was that like looking at a business model in terms of the hotel industry and business, and then looking at a second one, and then looking at the comparators, or did you have a different way of dealing with that?
5 years ago, our chairman asked for seismic change to happen within our food and beverage offering. The idea was to align our, as we like to call it, ground floor experience with the rest of the portfolio.
Ground floor experience. Okay.
That's just the kind of term that we coined internally amongst ourselves. But it's very important that our guests coming to our hotels have that very holistic experience, including of our public areas and food and beverage. 5 years ago, we appointed Amir Jati, who is quite known in the industry for his work with Nobu, with Disney, with the idea of rediscovering our food and beverage and taking it to the next level. It creates an opportunity to market your F&B product as a standalone, independent destination.
Okay.
Many hotels do it already. It's not something groundbreaking. It was for Edwardian the time to match what the best competitors out there do. Your Claridge's, the Ritz, the Connaught with their famous bar, top 50 bars on the planet almost every year. And of course, with that comes an added value to the customer, where in theory you could then yield more by offering more rounded experience. You said fine dining. Peter Street Kitchen in Manchester was voted the best luxury restaurant in the UK in the end of 2019. So for us, that brought an element of prestige, an element of brand awareness, an element of identity. We want our guests not only to visit our hotels, but independently for the patrons to go and enjoy a great meal in our outlets. And yes, Peter Street Kitchen is my favorite. It's a Japanese Mexican concept, incredibly popular in Manchester, right in the heart of the city. Now with the opening of the Londoner, we have created Whitcomb, which is a French concept, also a very refreshing concept in Leicester Square, which perhaps is not known yet for fine dining, but together with a few other operators, we are trying to change the perception of the square and bring a bit more hope to that place, I guess, to help further rejuvenate that area.
Wow. So once you guys have sat down and talked about the hotel industry and talked about fine dining, the pandemic hit. Where are you currently with the models, the forecasting, the planning for the future? Because do you feel that we're back right now? I'm hearing little bits that we're almost there.
Last year, again, going back to the original point of London being a brand in itself, a London being a destination, yes. we saw business coming back pretty much from August last year all the way to October. Had it not been for Omicron, we probably would have seen days that would have already been exceeding our yield in comparison to 2019. And really? In fact, business was going back, the confidence was going back. Of course, there is an aspect of revenge spending that one needs to consider. Having said that, the prognosis...
that is a term that you use in your industry, revenge spending.
I mean, you can see that, a lot of people post-pandemic, not a lot, it needs to be said that pandemic affected many lives.
Of course.
And I do not want to sound superficial to say that many people saved because they did not spend sure. in pubs. That's not what I mean. Nevertheless, those who stopped spending felt the need to make it up to themselves, and we have seen it, and we continue seeing it. And back in September, October, our forecasts were looking very healthy. The growth was consistent, gradual. One needs to remember that London is heavily reliant on international travel as well. Domestic travel before pandemic for us was about 40-45%, with the remaining on international travel basis. So of course, America started traveling, Europe started traveling, Asia started traveling, Middle East started traveling. So that confidence in London was rapidly growing back. Meetings and events, large events, we started receiving inquiries. There were a lot of annual events that were cancelled, and there is still that demand from the market to move back to these events. We all started getting used to virtual meetings, and then for the last 2 years everything was done virtually, and yet we're quite not there with technology at this stage, at least in our business and in many businesses. That meeting in face is much more meaningful.
Yes.
Even reading body language, even taking emotional intelligence into consideration. So we see, and in fact, create specific business offering for hybrid meeting spaces, adding cameras, adding conference microphones to all of our rooms, upgrading our Wi-Fi capacity, making sure that the offering is adjusted to every single customer, and we can meet those expectations. And we often run hybrid meetings where 80% of us are sitting in the room, and yet 20% are across the Atlantic, sitting somewhere in New York in the office. And that has been, and that is becoming more of a norm. But I still believe that people will always travel. People love to travel. Yes. We hear so many of our clients desperate to travel again, desperate to go back on the road, because that does create great opportunities.
There's a passion there, isn't there?
There is.
You offer so much for people's passion. You are a facilitator of that.
Business travel as well. As I said, a lot of industries of banking, for example, you can still see that Canary Wharf is not as busy as it used to be. And it would take time for them to get back. Yet you can see and you can hear that more and more businesses are quite eager for the staff to go back to offices, for the teams to start meeting together. International travel, international meetings, they need to happen, and you can see it right away that more and more businesses are coming to London and are meeting, and hopefully we can be the ones hosting them.
Wow, and long may that continue. What I'd like to do now is talk about our teams. You called them teams. It's funny that we've been calling them teams for probably about 2 to 3 years. Not that long. I think Microsoft Teams had a good part to play in that through the technology, but I'd really like to hear about how your teams, I think you said 2,500.
That was before the pandemic. Of course, we then had to relook at our staffing levels in order to guarantee the survival of the company. That was a difficult time in our organization, and I perhaps would not want to scratch on the old wounds. I think what's important is what are we doing about it now?
Yes.
And I think that it's fair to say that people are a cornerstone of every business, especially in hospitality. I said that operations are there to underpin our commercial teams, and there aren't any operations without the people. Without the people, a hotel is just a building. Sure. That's the reality of it. It could be as luxurious as it gets, but without the people who create the culture, who create the vibe, who create that feeling when you enter, it is really just an empty shell. And I think that for us, the focus on people, on development, on recognition has been more important than ever. As I said, we really put a lot of emphasis on growing our own talent. Majority of our GMs, general managers, are people who used to be head of departments, who used to be, like myself, receptionists or team leaders. So we really put a lot of emphasis. Of course, talent acquisition has become more difficult than ever. It's fair to say that there is a shortage of labor on the market, and that has got many reasons why. It is said that through pandemic, 1 in 10 would have left hospitality industry and rebranded into a different industry. Of course, it's natural. There was a lot of uncertainty. Furlough, was in place for more than a year. So I cannot blame people for not having that trust in hospitality. And I think that people like me, it is responsibility on us to be able to rebuild that trust, that hospitality creates incredible career opportunities. It's a very friendship-led business. We all like to think that we're friends in hospitality. I have some incredible memories from my time in hotels, and most of my true friendships are as a result of working in Edwardian, and I would like that spirit to transpire further, and for the public to see that hospitality is a place to work again. Of course, in order for us to be able to do it, we need to set these people to win. So we need to develop them, we need to teach them, we need to understand the differences, as I said, between generations. It's the first time in history that 4 generations work together, if you think about it. As our age span grows, more and more people remain actively in duty. So currently you have your baby boomers, you have your silent generation, you have your Z gen, you have your millennial, you have your X gen working together.
Wow.
And whilst you can't categorize people, you can kind of see that each of these groups represent different set of needs. A 21-year-old person will have a different set of needs than a mature 40-something, 50-something father or mother of 2. And you can't just take people in that vanilla magnolia approach. You need to seek for ways to individualize that process. What makes people satisfied at work? I think that happiness is a word that I try not to use, because that's a term that is quite difficult to pin more to, but that overall satisfaction. I think that there needs to be a level of fulfillment. If we're all free people. That's a great thing about this country. We're all free men, we all have a choice. And those who choose to be with Edwardian or any other organization, I think that need to feel something in return, whatever that is. It could be a sense of accomplishment, it could be a sense of security, it could be a sense of fulfillment. My manager listens to what I say. I have guaranteed that if something goes wrong in my personal life, my company has got my back. I can develop, I can speak freely, I can be who I am, I can express myself. Many other reasons, and they're quite individual in my view.
I've just been reading some research from Oxford University about the cost of loss to a business of an employee, and with an organisation with 2,500 staff, the loss of a person in productivity is £25,000. The loss of turnover is £30,000. The loss to recruitment and interviewing and all those other things, £5,000. So the measurements have actually been done. When I hear 2,500, my dizzy heights at 50, employing 50 of my own staff, is tiny in comparisons. And so I'm fascinated to know how, as an organisation, you look to try to implement those measurement processes. Is it just every year we had 2,500 at the beginning and now we have 3,000 or 2,000? Is that how you do it, or is it?
No. It's a bit more elaborate. I mean, there are metrics, and funny you said that we actually also during 2020 try to evaluate how much does it cost to acquire a staff member.
Okay.
And we have come to a figure of about 5 to 6K per person to acquire alone. As a result of that, we measure turnover of different bases. So you can measure turnover within the first 3 months. You could see that 80% of our staff members are likely to leave within the first 3 months.
Good grief.
So that then creates a question, why? Why do we have 80% of leavers within the first 3 months, yet those who are with the company over 5 years hardly ever leave?
Okay.
So what is the relation there? And you can, as I said, measure monthly turnover within 3 months. More important, if people do leave, we created a system of exit interviews. Why are you leaving? What are the reasons for it? And you have a set of very specific questions that would review ethical leadership or satisfaction from work, or working conditions, or working relationships, or recognition at work, flexibility at work. And all of it comes into a set of quantifiable data that then gives you certain compass. You can measure trends. We've seen it quite frequently, especially within our food and beverage departments, that element of corporate loyalty has somewhat disappeared. So how can we best guarantee that you joining an organization as a default, you wanted to join us? So what have we done wrong? That's the question that one needs to ask. It's not about you leaving us, it's about us letting you leave. And why are we there? Because we have just spent $5,000 recruiting you, screening CVs, running countless interviews, spending time on induction, giving you health and safety trainings, paying for your licensing to be able to access all of our corporate resources. When you join, of course, you're not a ready employee. You need to take time to develop. So then we spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, whatever it takes to get you where we would like you to be. And then you leave. Probably it's on us, no? That's how one needs to look at it. So
that's very intellectual, isn't it? To think in that way is a very good thing to do.
But it needs to be. Before the pandemic, we introduced employee surveys. Not only were they there to assess, as I said, what is your overall satisfaction, but as I have already mentioned, your sense of belonging, your ability to express yourself. And I think that it's quite easy to conclude that people leave because of money. I think that wage plays a significant part of the decision-making process, but more often than not, it's considered if it's fair. Wage needs to be fair. There is so much more behind the reasons for people to leave. And more often than not, you actually see that it's not the wage. And I'm not trying to, again, defend hospitality as an industry, because sure. I think that, in fact, it's quite a positive trend that pandemic is pushing hospitality to rethink our wage modeling, especially for the entry-level positions. The market has become much more competitive, and I think it's good to see really that organizations have moved quite significantly from the minimum wage, and we are far beyond that point, at least within Edwardian. But there is so much more to it, and you can only discover that if you speak to the people on the floor. You can't just come up with a theoretical opinion of it.
I think there was Glassdoor that did some research, and it said that 85% of employees and teams would take an employee benefit loyalty strategy over wages for a number of reasons, but mainly because if they're going to get a certain amount of money as a bonus, they know that some of that or a lot of that would go, they wouldn't receive it because of whatever reason, tax, for example. But it's interesting that the survey was about actually giving them different things that they valued.
Correct.
When we think it's money.
Correct.
And there are much more many
Correct.
things. I could talk to you all day. I'd like to sort of now just ask you, if you would, to tell our listeners about maybe getting in touch with you or seeing you on LinkedIn. Are you there? And also how somebody could now go to the group or to individual hotels about looking at what it is and how they could stay with you.
Certainly. Well, we are Edwardian Hotels London, so it takes as little as Googling us. You will find our homepage. You probably want to check out the londonerhotel.co.uk as well, because that's our latest. And myself, I am present on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to share the details of my profile, and if any of you kind listeners would like to ask me a personal question or a direct question about anything that we've discussed, if you disagree with anything I have said, please let me know, and I'll be very happy to open that dialogue. I think it's very enriching to share experiences with like-minded audience, and I always like to think that I'm quite open to feedback, and we all learn every day, and if we think that we know it all, that's when we start moving backwards.
Can I say, it's been fascinating insight into your world. Thank you very much for coming into our offices in Mayfair. And to our listeners, see you next time.